Shemai Paub, howdy everyone, and let's get straight into comparing two quite new fast standard zoom lenses for Sony's aps-c E-mount mirrorless cameras. On the left, we have the Sony E16-55mm f2.8G, which costs around $1,400 or around £1,100 here in the UK. And on the right, we have the brand new Tamron 17-70mm f2.8 Di3 VC RXD at only $800 or under £800 here in the UK. Both lenses offer a comprehensive zoom range, although the Tamron lens can zoom in considerably further. They both offer a bright, constant maximum aperture of f2.8, letting in a decent amount of light and potentially giving you nicely out of focus backgrounds. Only one of these lenses offers its own image stabilization system though. Oddly enough, it's the far less expensive Tamron lens. So if your aps-c camera does not have its own image stabilization built in, and many of Sony's aps-c cameras currently don't, then that's a major advantage to the Tamron lens already. As I've already mentioned, both these lenses will only cover an aps-c image circle, so if you own one of Sony's full-frame cameras, you'll have to shoot in crop mode. Still, it warms my heart to see manufacturers giving aps-c camera owners some healthy attention. So I've said a little about both lenses' parameters now, let's look at their build quality. Both lenses have surprisingly similar build quality, being mostly made of plastic but with metallic weather-sealed mounts. The Tamron lens is a little longer than the impressively compact Sony lens, but that's hardly surprising given the extra zoom range that it offers. The Sony lens also offers a few more external focus control buttons, which can be useful, and its focus ring is rubberized, so it has a few kudos points over the Tamron lens there. Both lenses have zoom rings that are rubberized and work very smoothly for video work without any stickiness. Video makers will also be pleased to note that both lenses have very responsive manual focus rings, and neither lens displays much in the way of focus breathing either. Both lenses have autofocus motors that are silent, quick and accurate. The Sony lens seems to be just slightly more confident than the Tamron, although the difference is rather negligible. Both lenses have 67mm filter thread sizes and plastic lens hoods to go with them. The Tamron lens weighs just over 500 grams, the Sony just under 500 grams. Overall, the two lenses really are surprisingly similar in build quality and functionality. The Sony lens offers a little more focus control on its body, but the Tamron lens features its own image stabilization, which could be enormously important to a lot of people. Let's move on now and look at image quality. I'll start with both lenses at their widest angles and at f2.8. Both lenses are razor sharp in the middle of their images here, with excellent contrast. Over in the corners, their image quality soften to a similar extent, although the Tamron lens shows some purple fringing on contrasting edges. Here is f4 and f5.6, where the Sony lens's sharpness seems to pull ahead of the Tamron a tiny bit, and the Tamron lens still exhibits a little colour fringing. Here's f8 and f11. Broadly speaking, the lenses are about as sharp as each other here. Perhaps the Sony lens has the tiniest of advantages, but the Tamron lens shows more colour fringing on contrasting edges at those wide angles. Well, let's zoom both lenses in about halfway now. In the middle of their images at f2.8, they both remain fantastically sharp with very good contrast. They also both offer impressive picture quality in the image corners, although the Sony lens is just a touch sharper here. They both stay this sharp down to about f8, where the effects of diffraction are just beginning to level the playing field a bit. Let's zoom both lenses all the way in now, the Sony to 55mm, the Tamron to 70mm. At f2.8, the Sony lens has a real advantage in sharpness and contrast in the middle of the image. Over in the corners, at first glance, the Tamron lens seems to offer more sharpness but a little less contrast. Unlike the Tamron lens though, the Sony lens I tested had its optics slightly decentered, and over in a different corner it was noticeably sharper, pulling up to compete with the Tamron lens now. Stop down to f4, and the Sony lens is a little sharper in its image corners now, but back in the middle, the Tamron lens has rallied itself and both of them look fantastic. At f5.6, the lenses are just as sharp in the middle, as you'd expect, but the corner image quality of the Tamron lens has now increased in contrast, looking excellent, although the Sony lens is still just a little step ahead. Here's f8, stop down to f16, and both lenses get softer due to the effect of diffraction. So, overall, considering that fast standard zoom lenses are among the most difficult for manufacturers to produce, both lenses are excellent, although the Sony lens is noticeably sharper in a few key areas, notwithstanding its poor quality control. You wouldn't normally expect a Tamron lens to be better centered than one of Sony's most expensive options. It's worth bearing in mind that a Tamron lens has a longer zoom range though, which will have made it more challenging to design. Let's turn off in-camera corrections now and take a look at distortion and vignetting. At their widest angles, the Sony lens shows an absolutely crazy amount of barrel distortion and the edges are literally black. The Tamron lens's performance is much more moderate. Stop down to f8 and the very edges are still black on the Sony lens, unfortunately. Well, let's zoom all the way in. Now, the Tamron lens is struggling, whereas the Sony lens's problems are largely under control. Stop down to f5.6 and the corners of the Tamron lens brighten up. So it swings and roundabouts here, but on both lenses you should definitely keep your in-camera corrections turned on. Now let's see about close-up image quality. Both lenses can get you fantastically close to your subject. The Tamron lens can get you much closer when you're shooting at wide angles, if you want some slightly crazy looking pictures, and its close-up image quality there is excellent, straight from f2.8. If you zoom in, then both lenses have quite soft close-up image quality, although the Tamron lens is worse considerably. Here's f4 and now f5.6, where the Tamron lens is catching up, and at f8 both lenses look excellent. Now let's look at how the two lenses work against bright light. The Tamron lens actually performs better here than the Sony, at wide angles anyway. When you zoom in, they're both as bad as each other, quite frankly. Finally, let's look at bokeh. Both lenses can get you nicely out of focus backgrounds when shooting at f2.8, however, the Tamron lens offers more opportunity for background separation, being able to zoom in to 70mm. Also, while both lenses have impressively soft looking backgrounds, I also think the Tamron lens handles busy backgrounds just a little more smoothly, although of course it's a question of taste. Overall, the Sony lens certainly offers a little more sharpness to your images than the Tamron lens does, including at close distances and especially in the image corners, and it's a little smaller and lighter. It also zooms out just a tiny bit wider. But although the Sony lens is excellent, you may need to sell one of your kidneys in order to afford it, whereas the Tamron lens offers a much longer zoom range, decent image quality, and image stabilization for much less money. So the Sony lens is spectacular but offers dreadful value for money, whereas the Tamron lens is very good, more flexible, and offers excellent value for money. So to my mind at least, the clear choice for almost everyone is, well, you got the idea. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it helpful, then head on down to Patreon, where you can support the channel and enjoy a whole load of exclusive content. There's a link in the description below. Ciao!